The encounter. The dense alien jungle was alive with the hum of strange insects and the faint cries of distant beasts. Sergeant Ryan Grayson moved cautiously through the undergrowth, his military instincts sharpened by years of experience. His orders were clear: survey the warlord's territory, gather intel, and return. But as he crouched behind a massive moss-covered tree, he spotted something that made him hesitate. In the clearing ahead, a group of towering alien guards surrounded a single figure. The alien woman stood shackled in chains that shimmered with a strange, otherworldly light. Her silver eyes burned with a fierce defiance that didn't match her frail appearance. Her skin, a pale shade of blue, was marred with bruises and cuts, evidence of the harsh treatment she had endured. Yet she stood tall, unbroken, as the guards shouted and gestured angrily at her. Ryan adjusted his visor, zooming in to get a better look. The woman's chains were connected to a heavy collar that hummed faintly. A control device, no doubt. The guards seemed agitated, shouting in their guttural language. But the woman didn't flinch. Instead, she glared back, her jaw clenched tightly. She was clearly outnumbered and overpowered, yet her spirit was unmistakable. "Why don't you run?" Ryan whispered to himself, his voice barely audible. "You're already on your knees." He didn't expect an answer, of course, but something about her unwavering resolve struck a chord deep within him. In the midst of the chaos and brutality of this war-torn planet, her silent rebellion stood out like a beacon. Ryan's training told him to stay focused on his mission, to avoid unnecessary risks, but his heart argued otherwise. The guards suddenly yanked on her chains, pulling her to the ground. One of them raised a jagged whip, its edges sparking with electrical energy. Ryan felt a surge of anger boil within him. He knew he couldn't interfere. This wasn't his fight. But as the guard prepared to strike, Ryan's grip on his rifle tightened. A faint cry of pain escaped the woman's lips as the whip came down, but her defiance didn't waver. She looked up at her tormentors with a glare that seemed to pierce through their thick armor. The guards barked orders to each other, dragging her toward a crude, makeshift platform in the clearing. A punishment display, Ryan realized. From his vantage point, he scanned the area. The guards were heavily armed, and the camp bristled with automated defenses. Engaging them would be suicide. But leaving her to face this fate gnawed at him. Just a recon mission, he reminded himself through gritted teeth. Get in, get out, report back. That's the job. Yet as he watched her being chained to the platform, a thought struck him. What if it were me? What if it were someone I cared about? He couldn't shake the image of her standing there, proud and unyielding despite everything. It wasn't just courage. It was something more, something he hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. The decision was made before he even realized it. Ryan activated his comms, speaking softly into his headset. Command. This is Grayson. I've encountered a situation. Proceeding to investigate. Over. No response. The dense jungle's interference had cut him off from his team. He was on his own. Silently, he moved through the undergrowth, his years of training making his movements almost imperceptible. The guards were too focused on their prisoner to notice him slipping closer. His rifle was at the ready, but Ryan knew he'd have to be smart. He needed to disable the guards quickly and quietly if he wanted any chance of getting her out alive. The woman, still bound to the platform, turned her head slightly. For a brief moment, her eyes seemed to lock onto Ryan's position. Had she seen him? It was impossible to tell, but something in her expression changed. A flicker of hope, expectation. He couldn't be sure, but it was enough to push him forward. As the first guard turned to adjust the chains, Ryan struck. A silent burst from his rifle sent the alien crumpling to the ground. Before the others could react, he had already closed the distance, taking out the second guard with a precise strike to the head. The remaining two guards shouted in alarm, raising their weapons, but Ryan was faster. He ducked behind the platform, using it as cover. A quick glance confirmed his fears. The noise had drawn the attention of more guards from the camp. Reinforcements were coming. Ryan turned to the woman. Her silver eyes bore into his, a mixture of disbelief and determination. "Can you walk?" he asked, keeping his voice low. She nodded, her chains rattling as she shifted. Yes. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying an unfamiliar accent. Ryan didn't have time to dwell on it. He pulled a small device from his belt and aimed it at the chains. A quick burst of energy dissolved the bonds, freeing her hands. "Follow me," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. The woman hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping down from the platform. As they ducked into the jungle, Ryan knew the real challenge was only beginning. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and miles from safety. Yet as he glanced at the woman beside him, he couldn't help but feel a spark of determination. He didn't know who she was or why she was here, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to let her spirit be crushed. Not today. Behind them, the warlord's hunters unleashed a pack of terrifying, genetically enhanced beasts, their howls echoing through the jungle. Ryan's grip tightened on his rifle. "Run," he said, and they disappeared into the shadows, breaking the chains. The jungle closed around them like a suffocating shroud. Ryan led the way, his military instincts on high alert as the alien woman followed close behind. Every step they took felt like a gamble, each crackle of dry leaves underfoot a potential betrayal of their position. Behind them, the guttural shouts of the warlord's hunters and the eerie howls of their hounds drew closer. Ryan glanced over his shoulder at the woman. Though her wrists were raw from the shackles, she moved with a quiet determination that surprised him. She didn't ask questions, didn't complain. She simply followed. There was no time for introductions or explanations. Survival came first. "Keep moving," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the ambient jungle noise. "We're not out of this yet." As they pushed through a dense thicket, the howls suddenly grew louder, closer. Ryan raised his hand, signaling the woman to stop. He dropped to a crouch and scanned the area with his rifle, searching for movement among the shadows. His visor detected heat signatures, 3 figures moving swiftly, accompanied by larger, animal-like shapes. "They're releasing the hounds," Ryan muttered under his breath. His grip tightened on the weapon. The woman knelt beside him, her silver eyes glinting in the dim light. "You can't fight them all," she said softly. Her accent was thick, but her words were clear. "Wasn't planning to," Ryan replied, pulling a small device from his belt. He pressed a button, and a faint hum emanated from it. "Distraction. Stay close to me. And when I say run, you run. Got it?" She hesitated, her gaze locking with his. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he set the device on the ground and armed it. "Because no one deserves what they were doing to you," he said finally. "Now move." The two of them crept forward, Ryan leading them toward a narrow gorge that he had marked on his map earlier. It was risky, but it was their best shot at shaking their pursuers. The terrain became steeper, the ground uneven, and Ryan reached out to steady the woman when she stumbled. "I'm fine," she said quickly, pulling her arm away. The defiance in her tone was still there, even now. Ryan couldn't help but admire it. A sharp howl pierced the air, closer than ever. The hounds had picked up their scent. Ryan cursed under his breath. They were running out of time. He activated the distraction device, which emitted a high-pitched frequency designed to disorient pursuers. It wouldn't hold them off for long, but it was enough to buy a few precious seconds. "Run," Ryan barked, grabbing the woman's arm and pulling her along as they sprinted through the jungle. The sound of the hounds faltered for a moment, but the hunters weren't far behind. The trees blurred past them, the uneven ground threatening to trip them up at every step. Suddenly, they burst into the gorge. The walls of the ravine rose steeply on either side, creating a natural bottleneck. Ryan skidded to a halt, pulling the woman behind a cluster of boulders. He quickly assessed their position. The gorge offered limited escape routes, but it also meant the hunters could only approach from one direction. "This is where we make a stand," Ryan said, breathing heavily. The woman looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You risk your life for someone you don't know. Humans are strange." Ryan allowed himself a faint smile. "Yeah, we are, but you're not dying here today." The first of the hounds appeared at the mouth of the gorge, its glowing red eyes scanning the area. Ryan raised his rifle, waiting for the perfect moment. The beast sniffed the air, its massive frame rippling with muscle as it stepped forward. Behind it, the hunters emerged, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. Ryan fired. The first shot took out the hound in a burst of sparks and blood. The hunters shouted in alarm, returning fire, but Ryan was already moving. He ducked behind the boulders, firing in controlled bursts to keep them at bay. The woman crouched beside him, her hands clenched into fists. She didn't cower or panic. Instead, she watched the fight with an intensity that suggested she was calculating something. When Ryan paused to reload, she reached out and touched his arm. "There's another way," she said. "What?" Ryan asked, glancing at her. "I know this area. There's a path through the cliffs, but it's dangerous. Very dangerous." Ryan weighed his options. Staying here meant certain death, but trusting her knowledge came with its own risks. Still, they didn't have much of a choice. "Show me," he said. The woman nodded and led him to a narrow crevice hidden behind a cluster of rocks. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, but it seemed to lead upward, toward the cliffs. "Go," Ryan urged, covering her as she climbed into the crevice. He fired another burst at the hunters, forcing them to take cover before following her into the narrow passage. As they climbed through the tight space, a deafening roar echoed behind them. One of the hounds had found their trail and was forcing its way into the crevice, its massive jaws snapping inches from Ryan's boots. "Move faster," Ryan shouted as the beast's growls grew louder. "The bond grows." The rocky crevice twisted and turned, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. Ryan's muscles ached as he climbed, every movement accompanied by the chilling sound of the hound growling behind them. Myra led the way, her slender frame navigating the narrow path with surprising agility. Ryan's boots scraped against the jagged rock, and he bit back a curse when a sharp edge sliced his arm. "Keep moving," Ryan urged, glancing back at the glowing red eyes of the pursuing hound. The beast clawed at the entrance, its massive frame too large to fully enter, but its determination relentless. Its guttural roars echoed through the passage, making the walls tremble. At last, they emerged from the crevice onto a rocky ledge high above the jungle. Ryan took a deep breath of the cool air, his rifle still trained on the crevice below. The hound's snarls faded, unable to follow them any farther, but the hunters weren't far behind. He knew it was only a matter of time before they found another way up. Myra stood at the edge of the ledge, gazing out over the jungle. Her silver eyes reflected the pale light of the distant moons. For a moment, she looked almost serene, despite the danger they were in. "You knew about this path," Ryan said, lowering his weapon and turning to her. "How?" "I told you I know this area," she replied, her voice calm but guarded. "I was taken from a village not far from here. Before they chained me, I used to climb these cliffs as a child." Ryan frowned. "A village? Are there others like you?" Her expression darkened. There were. The warlord's forces destroyed it. Those they didn't kill, they took. Ryan felt a pang of guilt. He had been trained to see aliens as adversaries, obstacles in humanity's fight for survival. But Myra wasn't just another alien. She was someone who had lost everything, yet still managed to stand tall. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Myra's gaze flicked to him, her expression softening slightly. "You humans, you apologize a lot, even for things that aren't your fault." Ryan shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. "Maybe, but it doesn't mean I don't mean it." She regarded him for a moment before nodding. "Thank you." Before Ryan could respond, The sound of distant shouts reached their ears. The hunters had found another route. Ryan scanned the area, his soldier's mind working quickly. The ledge offered little cover, and the path ahead was steep and treacherous. "We need to keep moving," he said. "There's a resistance base nearby. If we can make it there, we might have a chance." Myra hesitated. "The resistance. They don't trust humans." Ryan smirked. "They don't have to trust me. They just have to let us in." As they began their climb, Ryan couldn't help but notice how Myra moved. Despite her injuries, she was graceful, her movements almost instinctual. She was no ordinary prisoner. "Who were you before all this?" he asked as they ascended. She paused, glancing back at him. "Before I was taken, I was a scholar. I studied ancient languages and cultures. My people believed knowledge was the key to survival." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "And yet they sent you to fight." "They didn't send me," she said bitterly. "The warlord took me. He believed my knowledge would help him uncover ancient weapons hidden on this planet." Ryan's curiosity deepened. "And did you find them?" Her expression hardened. "If I had, I wouldn't be here now." Ryan didn't press further. He could see the weight of her past bearing down on her, but her determination remained unshaken. Whatever she had endured, it had forged her into someone stronger than she appeared. They reached a plateau where the jungle stretched out beneath them like an endless sea. The view was breathtaking, but Ryan's focus remained on their mission. Myra knelt beside a small pool of water, cupping her hands to drink. For the first time, Ryan saw a flicker of relief on her face. "You're tougher than you look," he said, crouching beside her. She glanced at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "And you're kinder than you let on." Before Ryan could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the air. A warning shot. He spun around, his rifle at the ready. From the shadows of the rocks, a group of resistance fighters emerged, their weapons trained on him and Myra. "Don't move," one of them barked. Ryan raised his hand slowly, his heart pounding. Myra stepped forward, her voice firm. "Wait. He's with me." The fighters exchanged wary glances. Their leader, a grizzled alien with scared skin, narrowed his eyes. "And why should we trust a human?" Myra straightened her back, her defiant spirit shining through. "Because without him, I wouldn't be standing here. And if you want to survive what's coming, you'll listen to what he has to say." The resistance leader lowered his weapon slightly, but before anyone could speak, the unmistakable sound of the warlord's war machines rumbled in the distance. "They found us," Ryan said grimly. "We don't have much time." A stunning revelation. The rumble of the warlord's war machines grew louder, sending tremors through the rocky plateau. Ryan instinctively scanned the horizon, his military training kicking in. The resistance fighters around him exchanged nervous glances, their weapons trembling in their hands. "They're coming," Ryan said, his voice steady. "If we don't move now, they'll pin us down." The resistance leader, the grizzled alien Myra called Krell, stepped forward. His distrust of Ryan was obvious, but the urgency of the situation left no room for debate. "Why should we trust you, human? For all we know, you've led them here." Ryan stepped closer, his expression hard. "If I wanted to sell you out, I wouldn't be standing here. I'm trying to keep her alive," he said, nodding toward Myra. "And right now, you need me if you want to survive." Krell hesitated, his sharp eyes flicking to Myra. "Is this true?" Myra, standing tall despite her exhaustion, nodded. "He risked his life to free me. He's not like the others." Krell grunted, clearly still skeptical, but he waved his soldiers to lower their weapons. "Fine. But if this goes south, it's on you, human." Ryan didn't waste time responding. He turned to Myra. "You said you know this area. Is there a defensible position nearby?" Myra hesitated before answering. "There's a cave system a mile from here. It leads to the cliffs. It's dangerous, but it's our best chance." Ryan nodded. "Then that's where we're going. Let's move." The group hurriedly gathered their supplies and set off. The journey to the caves was tense, the sound of engines growing louder behind them. Ryan took point, his rifle at the ready, while Myra stayed close, her sharp gaze scanning their surroundings. As they reached the mouth of the caves, Ryan noticed something strange. The walls of the entrance were etched with intricate symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. He paused, running his fingers over the carvings. "What is this?" he asked, glancing at Myra. She stepped forward, her expression guarded. "These are the ruins of my ancestors. They built this network of caves as a sanctuary during the Great Wars. But they also hid something else." Ryan's brow furrowed. Something else. Myra hesitated, as if debating whether to continue. Finally, she said, "Legends speak of a weapon hidden deep within these caves, a weapon powerful enough to destroy entire armies." The resistance fighters murmured in alarm, but Ryan's mind raced. "Is that why the warlord was keeping you alive? He wanted you to find it." "Yes," Myra admitted. "He believed my knowledge of our ancient texts could lead him to the weapon. But I refused to help him." Ryan's jaw tightened. "And now he's coming here, isn't he?" Myra nodded. "He knows what lies within these caves. If he finds it, he'll be unstoppable." Krull stepped forward, his voice gruff. "We can't let that happen. If there's even a chance this weapon exists, we have to destroy it." Ryan shook his head. "Destroying it might not be an option. We don't even know what we're dealing with. But if we can find it first, we might be able to turn the tide." The group entered the caves, the air growing cooler and heavier as they descended. The walls were lined with more glowing symbols, their meanings lost to everyone but Myra. She moved with purpose, her fingers occasionally brushing against the carvings as if they were guiding her. Ryan stayed close, his unease growing with every step. "What kind of weapon are we talking about?" he asked. Myra's voice was quiet. "I don't know. The texts were vague, but they called it the Heart of the Void. Some believed it was a machine. Others thought it was alive." Ryan stopped in his tracks. "Alive? What does that mean?" "I don't know," Myra said, her tone frustrated. "But whatever it is, it's dangerous." Before Ryan could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, ominous hum filled the air, and the symbols on the walls glowed brighter. Myra froze, her expression shifting from determination to fear. "They're here," she whispered. Ryan spun around, his rifle raised. "No," he said, scanning the shadows. "This isn't them. This is something else." The hum grew louder, almost deafening, as a faint light began to emanate from the depths of the cave. Myra's breath caught. "We're not alone," she said, her voice trembling. And then, from the darkness, a figure emerged, shimmering, ethereal, and undeniably alive. The turning point. The shimmering figure stepped forward, its form an otherworldly blend of light and shadow. It wasn't entirely solid. Its edges flickered like the static of a broken screen. Ryan's instincts screamed at him to act, but he froze, his rifle trained on the being. Myra, however, seemed entranced. She stepped closer, her hand outstretched, as if compelled by an invisible force. "It's the Guardian," she whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. "Guardian?" Ryan asked sharply, keeping his weapon aimed. "What is it?" Myra didn't look back. The legend spoke of a protector left behind to guard the heart of the void. It judges those who seek it. The Guardian tilted its head, its glowing, featureless face focusing on Myra. Its voice echoed in their minds, resonating with a strange harmony. "Why have you come?" Myra took a shaky breath, her voice steady despite the tension. "I seek the heart, not for conquest, but to protect my people. The warlord, he will use it to destroy everything." The Guardian shifted its gaze to Ryan, its presence heavy and suffocating. "And you, human? Why do you stand here? Your kind has no place among the Seekers." Ryan hesitated, lowering his rifle slightly. "I'm here to stop that warlord, to make sure whatever this weapon is, it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The guardian was silent for a moment, its form flickering as if it were studying them both. You speak of protection, but you carry weapons of war. You claim peace, yet you walk the path of violence. Prove your worth. Before either of them could respond, the guardian raised an arm, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. The glowing symbols on the walls flared, and the cavern split into two paths. One path leads to the heart. The other leads to death. Only the worthy may find the truth. Choose. The guardian vanished, leaving the group in stunned silence. The resistance fighters exchanged uneasy glances, but it was Myra who broke the spell. "We have to choose," she said, her voice firm. Ryan stepped forward, his jaw tight. "This feels like a trap. If we pick wrong, then we die." Myra finished. She looked at him, her silver eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "But if we do nothing, the warlord will take everything. We have no choice." Krell growled in frustration. "This is madness. We're soldiers, not puzzle solvers." Ryan placed a hand on Krell's shoulder. "Calm down. Panic won't help. Myra, you're the expert here. What do you think?" Myra studied the two paths, her fingers brushing the glowing symbols. The markings, their warnings. The left path speaks of trials, tests of will and heart. The right path, it's empty. It says nothing. Ryan frowned. Empty sounds safer. Myra shook her head. "No, the ancients wouldn't make it that easy. The emptiness is a trick. It leads to death." Ryan nodded. "Then we go left." The group hesitated but ultimately followed Ryan and Myra down the left path. The air grew colder, and the walls seemed to close in around them. Strange whispers echoed through the cavern, words in a language Ryan couldn't understand. Myra, however, appeared to hear them clearly. "They're asking questions," she murmured, "testing our intentions." "What kind of questions?" Ryan asked, his voice low. Myra glanced at him, her expression tense. "Questions about sacrifice, about courage, about trust." Ryan's mind raced. Trust. He glanced back at the resistance fighters, then at Myra. Whatever this trial was, it wasn't just testing her, it was testing all of them. The whispers grew louder, turning into an almost unbearable cacophony. The group staggered, clutching their heads. Myra cried out, collapsing to her knees. Ryan rushed to her side, his heart pounding. "Stay with me, Myra," he said, gripping her shoulders. "We're almost through this." She looked up at him, her silver eyes shimmering with tears. "You don't understand. It's asking me to choose." "Choose what?" Ryan demanded. Myra's voice trembled. "Who lives and who dies?" Before Ryan could respond, the whispers stopped, and the cavern plunged into total silence. A glowing doorway appeared ahead, and the guardian's voice echoed in their minds once more. "The heart awaits, but only the chosen may enter. Decide now, or lose everything." Ryan's eyes met Myra's, and the weight of the decision bore down on them both. A fight for freedom. The cavern was deathly silent except for the faint hum of the glowing doorway ahead. Ryan's heartbeat thundered in his ears as he faced Myra. Her silver eyes were wide with fear and uncertainty, the burden of the Guardian's demand weighing heavily on her. "Decide now." The Guardian's voice echoed again, its tone cold and unyielding. "Only the chosen may enter. The others will perish." Krell gripped his weapon tightly, his scared face a mixture of rage and desperation. "This is insanity. We came here to fight for freedom, not to die in some ancient trap." Ryan stepped between Krell and Myra, raising a hand. "Nobody's dying here," he said firmly, his gaze shifting to Myra. "We'll find another way." Myra shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "There is no other way. The Guardian won't let us pass unless we make the choice." The resistance fighters murmured nervously, their resolve faltering. Ryan felt the weight of their fear and doubt pressing down on him. He clenched his jaw, his mind racing. "Listen to me," Ryan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't about who's worthy or not. It's about survival. If we let fear control us, we lose everything." Krell snorted. "Easy for you to say, human. You're not the one being asked to choose who dies." Ryan ignored him and turned to Myra. "What if we don't play by their rules? What if the answer isn't sacrifice but unity?" Myra blinked, her expression shifting as his words sank in. "Unity." Ryan nodded. "The Guardian is testing us, right? It wants to see if we're worthy. Maybe that means proving we're stronger together." Krell scoffed. "And if you're wrong?" Ryan glanced at him, his expression hard. "Then we fight." Before anyone could argue further, the rumble of the warlord's war machines echoed through the cavern, growing louder with each passing second. Myra's gaze snapped to the glowing doorway, determination replacing her hesitation. "We don't have time to debate," she said, stepping toward the doorway. "I'll face it alone." "No," Ryan said sharply, grabbing her arm. "You don't have to do this by yourself." "It's my people's burden," Myra replied, her voice trembling but resolute. "You've done enough." Ryan shook his head. "I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself. We're in this together." Myra hesitated, searching his eyes. For a moment, the weight of her fear seemed to lift, replaced by a flicker of hope. She nodded. "Together, then." Ryan turned to the group. "If we're going to survive, we need to stand as one. No more doubt. No more fear. Are you with me?" The resistance fighters exchanged uncertain glances, but one by one, they nodded. Even Krell, though grumbling under his breath, raised his weapon in agreement. The group stepped toward the glowing doorway, their movements hesitant but unified. As they crossed the threshold, the Guardian's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "You defy the trial." "Why?" Ryan raised his head, meeting the glowing figure that appeared before them. "Because we're stronger together. Sacrifice isn't the answer. Unity is." The Guardian tilted its head, its shimmering form flickering. "A bold claim. Let it be tested." The ground beneath them shook violently as the cavern transformed. The walls melted away, replaced by a vast, open arena lit by the same ethereal glow. From the shadows, monstrous creatures emerged, hulking beasts with razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. "Here we go," Ryan muttered, raising his rifle. "Hold the line." The group formed a defensive circle, fighting side by side as the creatures charged. Ryan's rifle spat bursts of plasma, each shot finding its mark. Myra stood at his side, wielding a spear she had pulled from the cavern's wall, her movements graceful and precise. The resistance fighters, emboldened by Ryan's leadership, fought fiercely. Krell's roar of defiance echoed across the arena as he tore through the creatures with a massive blade. Despite their fear, they stood firm, each one protecting the other. The battle was brutal, but the group's unity proved unbreakable. As the last creature fell, the Guardian's voice returned, its tone softer but no less powerful. "You have proven your worth. The heart of the void is yours to command. Use it wisely." The arena faded, returning them to the cavern. In the center of the room, a pulsating orb of light hovered, its energy radiating with an almost tangible force. Myra stepped forward, her hand outstretched. As Myra's fingers brushed the orb, a surge of energy enveloped her, and her silver eyes glowed brightly. She gasped, her voice filled with both awe and fear. "It's alive." Ryan stepped toward her, his rifle still in hand. "What do you mean, alive?" Myra turned to him, her voice trembling. "The heart. It's not a weapon. It's a being. And it's awake. The ultimate stand." The pulsating orb hovered in the center of the cavern, its light growing brighter with each passing second. Myra stood frozen, her hand still extended as the energy from the heart of the void coursed through her. Her silver eyes glowed with a brilliance that seemed almost otherworldly, and Ryan could see the fear and wonder battling within her. "It's awake," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It's aware." Ryan stepped closer, his rifle raised cautiously. What do you mean, it's aware? What is this thing? Myra turned to him, her voice filled with urgency. The heart isn't a weapon. It's a living entity. It holds the power to create or destroy, depending on the will of the one who wields it. Krell snarled, stepping forward. Then we destroy it. We can't let something this dangerous exist. No. Myra snapped, her voice sharp and commanding. Destroying it would release its energy and annihilate everything around us. The only way to stop the warlord is to use it. Ryan's jaw tightened as he processed her words. And what happens to you if you use it? Myra hesitated, her glowing eyes meeting his. I don't know. Before Ryan could respond, the cavern trembled violently, the rumble of the warlord's war machines growing deafeningly close. The doorway behind them burst open, and a flood of armored soldiers poured in, their weapons raised. The warlord entered last, his towering figure casting a long shadow over the group. His deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber. The heart is mine. Surrender it, or face annihilation. Ryan stepped in front of Myra, his rifle trained on the warlord. You'll have to go through me first. The warlord laughed, a cold, menacing sound. A single human dares to challenge me. Foolish. But before he could give the order to attack, Myra raised her hand, the energy of the heart swirling around her. Her voice rang out, clear and powerful. You will not take this from me. The warlord's eyes narrowed. So, the servant dares to defy her master. Very well. Die with the rest. The warlord's forces charged, and the cavern erupted into chaos. Ryan and the resistance fighters fought fiercely, their unity tested as they faced the overwhelming enemy. Plasma bolts lit the air, and the clash of metal echoed through the chamber. Myra stood at the center, her connection to the heart growing stronger with each moment. Energy crackled around her, and her voice echoed with a strange harmonic tone. Enough. The entire chamber shook as a wave of energy erupted from the heart, freezing the warlord's forces in their tracks. Ryan stared in awe as Myra's presence seemed to grow, her silver eyes blazing like twin stars. The warlord snarled, his massive frame straining against the invisible force holding him in place. You think this will stop me? You are nothing. Myra stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. I am not nothing. I am more than you ever allowed me to be. The heart pulsed, and the warlord roared as the energy enveloped him, reducing him and his soldiers to dust. The cavern fell silent, the only sound the faint hum of the heart. Ryan lowered his rifle, his chest heaving as he turned to Myra. You did it. Myra's glowing eyes softened, and the energy around her began to fade. She swayed, her strength draining rapidly. Ryan caught her before she fell, his arms steadying her. You're not alone anymore, he said softly. Myra looked up at him, her expression weary but grateful. Thank you for believing in me. Krell and the remaining resistance fighters approached cautiously, their faces a mix of awe and respect. Krell gave a gruff nod. You've earned our trust, human. And yours, Myra. You've given us hope. As the group left the cavern, the heart dimmed, its energy retreating into silence once more. Myra leaned on Ryan for support, her strength slowly returning. The jungle stretched before them, but the oppressive weight of fear had lifted. Ryan glanced at Myra, a faint smile on his lips. So, what now? Myra's silver eyes sparkled with determination. Now, we rebuild. Together. The camera pans up to the sky, where the faint light of distant stars hints at a future shaped by unity and resilience.